On August 21st, 1940, Leon Trotsky laid in bed after barely surviving a brutal stabbing in his study the day before. He would go on to pass away in a coma at 7:25 p.m. later that day. The assassination made the quiet town of Coyoacán the final battlefront for a war of minds that had been waging for decades in a country halfway across the world. Tensions were high. The world was watching, waiting to see how the Mexican government would respond to the death of one of socialism's most fervent advocates. Investigators soon turned their attention to none other than Frida Kahlo, a rising artist gaining worldwide acclaim. She was soon arrested and brought in for questioning in connection to the murder of her one-time lover. To understand why the government turned their attention to Frida, it's important to understand Frida's place in the world and the beliefs that became an integral part of who she was. Frida Kahlo was born on July 6, 1907 in Coyoacán, Mexico. Her father, Guillermo, had immigrated to Mexico from Germany. He would meet Frida's mother, Matilde Calderón, in a jewelry shop where they both worked. At the time, Guillermo was newly widowed, having lost his first wife after she gave birth to their second child. The relationship between Matilde and Guillermo was contentious, but they raised their daughters with the curiosity and tenacity that became synonymous with the Kahlo surname. Coyoacán was a slow town nestled in the outskirts of Mexico City. Their home, now the well-known Casa Azul, was safe from the rebellion that was raging in town, at least in the early years. By the time Frida was born, the Mexican Revolution was boiling over, and the countryside was quiet no more. The Mexican Revolution came after a long history of oppression through colonial rule that can be dated back to the time of the conquistadores. By the end of the 19th century, the indigenous population had grown tired of seeing the inequality that was growing within their communities. Their land was being stripped and their labor was being sold for pennies to foreign investors. By 1910, the national coffers had grown to an all-time high, but a crash was imminent. Once the money stopped coming into the country, labor wages began to shrink. The agricultural and laboring class, largely native Mexicans, were facing extreme poverty, yet the rich were hardly struggling. And so began the bloody Mexican Revolution, a decade-long fight for equality and material improvements that would end up being the biggest loss of life on the continent in the 20th century. It was during this time that the quiet town of Coyoacán experienced its first decade of unrest. The Kahlos struggled under the new economy and at times had to remortgage their house, sell furniture, and even had to rent out rooms to make ends meet. After a decade, the revolution would come to an end, ushering in a new era of national consciousness and a renewed pride for the culture that had been buried by the years of oppression. This would come to be known as Mexicanidad. Frida Kahlo would go on to take the spirit of pride with her as she went to go study at the renowned Preparatoria in Mexico City. Frida Kahlo was notoriously rambunctious, becoming well known in her town and school as an outspoken and free thinker. While attending, Frida joined Los Cachuchas, a campus-based radical group named after the caps they wore in defiance of the dress code. The group avidly studied works by Lenin, Marx, Hegel, Kant, and dove into Russian literature and Mexican fiction. Frida, a self-proclaimed daughter of the Mexican Revolution, engaged in passionate debates with her peers, hailing from the country's most elite families. By the time Frida was in high school, she witnessed the rise of the new Mexican regime that was created after the revolution. They sought to create a program to heal the pride of the wounded country and walk proudly into the future as a united front. To achieve their plan, Mexico wanted large-scale murals to be created with themes that glorified the Mexican Revolution. and celebrated the pride and cultural beauty of the country. The average citizen at the time was illiterate, so leadership chose to visually communicate its unifying message through art. It was through this initiative that the young Frida Kahlo would cross paths with her future husband, Diego Rivera. His work became synonymous with Mexicanidad, where he painted with the vivid colors the country was known for, and often featured the working class as noble and glorious figures. In 1922, the Escuela Nacional Preparatoria commissioned Diego to paint The Creation, the first painting to come from the program. While Diego Rivera worked on The Creation at the Simón Bolivar Amphitheater, he was unaware that Los Cachuchas hung out in the area and were known for their mischievous pranks. A 15-year-old Kahlo would hide herself in the bleachers, taunting the painter. Beneath the surface of her teasing, Frida secretly nurtured a growing admiration for the artist. On September 17, 1922, Frida Kahlo was on her way home with her boyfriend, Alejandro Arias, after a day of classes. Shortly after sitting down on the wooden bench, the trolley car they were on would turn a corner and crash, traveling at full speed. Of the crash, Frida remembered. It was a strange crash, not violent, but dull and slow, and it injured everyone, me much more seriously. A steel handrail would impale Frida Kahlo through her hip. The accident would leave Frida with a fractured spine and pelvis, making the rest of Kahlo's life an incredibly painful ordeal. The injuries were so severe that Kahlo had to be encased in a full body cast, leaving her bedridden. To stave off the isolation, Frida's parents gifted her a special easel that allowed her to paint while in her bed. A mirror was also installed above her canopy, allowing her to immortalize her most treasured muse, herself. I paint myself because I am often alone, and I am the subject I know best. This period ultimately compelled her to leave behind her childhood aspiration of becoming a doctor in favor of an artistic career. Frida's initial forays into painting bore traces of the emotional intensity that would define her later work, though they lacked refinement. As she dove deeper into her art, Frida honed a distinctive style, juxtaposing the realism of classical portraiture with surreal, emotionally charged landscapes. Her paintings became an escape, a means to confront the agony of her accidents and the inner turmoil that perpetually haunted her. By 1928, Frida began to venture beyond the confines of her bed, attending parties and rekindling her connection with the world. It was during this time that she crossed paths once more with Diego Rivera. Diego Rivera was in the process of creating his seminal work, Balada de la Revolución, a piece that served as a tribute to the Mexican Communist Party, portraying it as a harbinger of a promising new era of prosperity. In that same year, Frida Kahlo became a member of the Mexican Communist Party herself, assuming an active role as an organizer. She delivered impassioned speeches and spearheaded many union rallies. Diego, witnessing her fervor, found himself deeply impressed. The cause of communism and the promotion of its principles held profound significance for the painter, who had recognized the necessity for change while coming of age in his impoverished hometown. Their admiration for each other was far beyond mutual. It was profound. Observing Diego's work had a true impact on Frida, and it inspired her to approach the man she had once teased in her childhood, inviting him to critique her work. Diego was so impressed by what he saw that he encouraged the young painter to dive deeper into her art. He was so moved by Frida as a person that he immortalized her in his painting of Balada de la Revolución. There, in the center, she stood as a proud member of the Mexican Communist Party that she so fervently supported. The two would marry the following year. Their union was an unlikely one. Her father described the matrimony as a wedding between an elephant and a dove. Nevertheless, the couple would embark on a tour out of Mexico, with Frida joining Diego on a series of commissions across America. Diego's work took them from San Francisco to Detroit and finally to New York. This marked Frida Kahlo's first exposure to American culture, and it was a true culture shock for the young Mexican artist. When Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera arrived in the United States, the country was in the throes of the Great Depression, and the two encountered the devastating consequences of a racially segregated America under Jim Crow laws. The couple met a wide spectrum of people, from socialites to business tycoons and everyone in between. Through these interactions, Frida directly observed the stark wealth disparity prevalent in all facets of American society. High society would come to repulse Frida. She spoke about being filled with anger towards the wealthy, especially after witnessing countless people living in abject poverty, starving and homeless. It was horrifying to the young artist to see the wealthy indulge in endless parties while thousands suffered from hunger. During this period, Nelson Rockefeller commissioned Diego Rivera to create Man at the Crossroads, looking with hope and high vision to the choosing of a new and better future. Through this artwork, Rivera aimed to starkly contrast communism and capitalism. The mural would soon erupt into scandal as the American press condemned it as blatant anti-capitalist propaganda. While her husband was preoccupied with the commission, a mix of inspiration and torment allowed Frida to dive deep into her art, giving birth to some of her most politically charged creations. Through her work, she channeled her acute perception of the shallowness of American capitalism and the relentless march of progress and industrialization, offering a sharp critique on what she witnessed. In Self-Portrait on the borderline between Mexico and the United States, Frida Kahlo stands at the crossroads between her Mexican heritage and the encroaching industrialization of America. It portrays a desolate landscape dominated by a chilling factory emitting nauseous gases into the sky, with the American flag obscured within its haze. Her depiction of America carries a somber tone, stripped of vitality, culture, and even nature. She would follow that up with My Dress Hangs There. Here, Frida presents a unique self-portrait. She depicts her Tijuana dress, pristine and central on a clothesline, while the decay of American consumerism engulfs its surroundings. As America appears to crumble into societal chaos, her dress stands as a symbol of purity and cleanliness, offering a stark commentary on the state of the nation. On the back of the painting, Frida simply wrote, "I painted this in New York when Diego was painting the mural in Rockefeller Center." Before Frida could finish the painting, however, Rockefeller would come to condemn Diego's creation, commanding his workers to chisel the mural off the lobby of the RCA building in Rockefeller Center. Frida's homesickness grew overwhelming by this point, and her disappointment with their time in the United States intensified. Despite Diego's newfound affection for the country, he understood the depth of Frida's dismay, and the two left for Mexico. When they returned to Mexico, the couple found a new home in the upscale San Angel neighborhood. Their relationship by then was deeply strained, bearing the weight of miscarriages and numerous affairs, which left them dissatisfied and resentful with one another. Frida had grown accustomed to the notion that her own body might fail her, but when her husband strayed, the pain was particularly crushing. It felt like a profound betrayal. Frida would soon discover her husband's affair with her sister. This betrayal by Diego shattered her trust and irreparably harmed her relationship with a sister she had held in the highest regard. Frida's despair was overwhelming, made worse when she learned that the affair had been a well-known secret and had persisted for about 5 years. Frida would respond by cutting off her hair and created a painting to immortalize the intense pain she felt. The artwork depicted the painter bleeding out onto a bed. A few small nips emphasized the deep emotional turmoil wrought by the affair. Still so, she loved the man deeply, and she found it within herself to forgive him time and time again. In hindsight, the affair seemed to arise from genuine curiosity and loneliness felt by both. Diego's constant preoccupation with his work frequently left Frida alone with her thoughts. However, she wasn't consumed by devastating loneliness. Frida was a socialite who enjoyed parties and the people around her, which sometimes led her to encounters with new lovers herself. Many of those connections were short-lived though. Separations punctuated this turbulent period, but still Frida and Diego reconciled. Of her husband, Frida once remarked, "There have been two great accidents in my life. One was the trolley, the other one was Diego. Diego was by far the worst." In 1937, the couple had reconciled and embarked on a new mission fueled by their shared interest in communism. During this period, the Russian Revolution was in full swing, with Stalin at the helm. Stalin's significant role in the Russian Civil War was marked by a pivotal moment when he aided Lenin in evading authorities. Lenin, as the leader of the Bolshevik movement, was a prime target for opposing forces who aimed to eliminate him and suppress the Bolshevik uprising. Stalin's support for Lenin not only protected the Bolshevik leader, but also solidified his own reputation as a leader aligned with the Bolshevik cause. After Lenin's passing in 1924, he took on the leadership of the nation. Stalin's regime had divided the ideology originally championed by Lenin into two factions, the Stalinists and the Trotskyites. The Stalinists, led by Joseph Stalin, believed that the working class required guidance and control to successfully establish a communist society. They advocated for a mixed system where capitalism played a pivotal role in the step towards a true working class socialist revolution. Key resources remained under state ownership, and production was decided by the government. In contrast, Trotsky believed in a more direct transition to communism, where resources would be distributed equally and power would be decentralized. Only then could a permanent revolution be achieved. Leon Trotsky began his political career at a young age, actively promoting Marxist ideas in public discussions. He would gain notoriety for being repeatedly sent to jail due to his fervent activism. In 1902, Trotsky crossed paths with Vladimir Lenin in London, while the two of them were in exile for their revolutionary beliefs. Despite their shared socialist goals, their relationship was a mix of cooperation and rivalry, often resulting in disagreements over strategies and policies. Lenin admired Trotsky's public speaking and organizational skills, which led to a significant role in the Bolshevik Revolution. However, Lenin had concerns about Trotsky's methods, which strained their partnership. Despite that, their joint efforts played a vital role in shaping the early Soviet state. After Lenin's death in 1924, a power struggle unfolded within the Soviet leadership, resulting in Trotsky's defeat by Joseph Stalin. Despite his previous influence in the early Soviet government, Trotsky faced gradual isolation for his ideas and was eventually exiled from the Soviet Union in 1929. By 1937, Trotsky was traveling across Europe in search of asylum, driven away by his increasingly strained relationship with Stalin, who now saw him as his primary adversary. Stalin believed that Trotsky posed a significant threat to his hold on power, because Trotsky had played a crucial role in developing the communist theory initially advanced by Lenin, while Trotsky provided the intellectual foundation. Stalin possessed the strength to enforce his vision of communism over the country. By January 9th, 1937, Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera had successfully secured the asylum for Leon Trotsky and his wife Natalia Sedova with the Mexican government. Kahlo found herself waiting for the two on the port of Tampico, dressed in her Tijuana best. Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera arranged for the couple to live in their second home, La Casa Azul, which they turned into a fortified sanctuary. They equipped the house with guards, barricades, covered windows, and alarm systems to protect the revolutionary from Stalin's worldwide reach. Despite these security measures, Leon Trotsky found comfort in this newfound home. It was filled with vibrant plants and spacious rooms adorned with art, providing a peaceful retreat from the dangers they had just escaped. For Trotsky, it provided a much-needed break from the challenging circumstances they were facing. Amid all the amenities of the new home, the person who seemingly brought Leon Trotsky the most peace was none other than Frida Kahlo herself. By the time Leon arrived in Mexico, Frida Kahlo was a passionate supporter of Trotsky's communist ideas. She had extensively studied his work and had fervently advocated for his theories within the Mexican Communist Party. The two quickly formed a deep connection centered around their exchange of thoughts and philosophies on life and communism. What began as conversations in the courtyard and nighttime dinners soon evolved into a full-blown affair. They exchanged letters hidden within books throughout the house. The two occasionally spoke in English in front of Natalia, who couldn't understand the language. When the affair became too difficult to keep hidden, they would secretly rendezvous at Frida's sister's home, engaging in their forbidden liaisons away from the eyes of the town and the guards around them. The affair would be short-lived, as it became increasingly difficult to keep hidden, ultimately unraveling within 6 months. By June, Natalia had discovered the depth of the relationship between the artist and the revolutionary, leading to her devastating decision to separate from her husband of 35 years. In written correspondence between Natalia and Leon, she expressed her profound despair, stating, "I do not want to see people, the life around me, all this hustle. I do not want to eat. I want to fall down on the floor and never get up again." The damage, by then, was done. Leon Trotsky begged his wife to return, writing in his letters, "She is no one to me. You are everything to me." Still unclear who ended the affair. Speculation leans toward Frida, as she had become increasingly weary of Trotsky. In her letters to a friend, she labeled him an old man, chastising his irritability, going so far as to call him a goat. The fun was over. Before leaving La Casa Azul, Frida Kahlo created a parting gift for Leon Trotsky, a painting to be presented on his birthday. The artwork portrayed Frida in her Tijuana attire, holding tight a bouquet of flowers and a letter in her hand. On the letter, Frida wrote, "To Leon Trotsky, with all my love, I dedicate this painting on the 7th of November, 1937. Upon moving to a new compound in Coyoacán, Trotsky chose to display the painting within his study, showing his deep appreciation for the artist. Their relationship would end soon, with their last meeting taking place in January of 1939. As the distance between the two widened, Frida's own stance on communism underwent a transformation. Frida Kahlo was still actively engaged in the fight for communism. She sought out pamphlets, magazines, and articles that provided insights into the unfolding revolution in Russia. She remained an engaged member of the Mexican Communist Party, keeping on top of the news regarding communism's progress in Russia. Eventually, Frida shifted toward Stalinism, likely influenced by Stalin's apparent success in turning Russia into a communist state. It's essential to bear in mind that many of the atrocities committed by Joseph Stalin against the Russian people remained hidden for decades. Under Joseph Stalin's rule, strict censorship and state-controlled media were used to maintain control over all information. Propaganda portrayed the country as ideal and silenced dissent. Access to foreign information was limited, and history was rewritten to fit the official narrative of the new regime. The government effectively concealed repression and human rights abuses until after Stalin's death. In time, the distance between Leon Trotsky and Frida Kahlo grew till it couldn't be bridged again. Amid a crucial election in Mexico, the nation faced a pivotal choice between embracing democracy or maintaining its historical ties to the leadership of the Mexican Revolution. This was a breaking point for not only Trotsky and Kahlo, but for Trotsky and the Mexican government. Trotsky's asylum in Mexico was a complex process. It was secured through a close partnership with General Francisco José Mujica, the heir apparent to the presidency in 1939. The Mexican government was cautious, wary of upsetting the Soviet Union due to Trotsky's presence in the country. Trotsky took an increase in restrictions on his political organizing as an escalation, creating more tension between Trotsky and the Mexican government. By the time of the 1939 election, Trotsky was a strong critic of General Mujica's candidacy, while Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera publicly supported him. Trotsky rebuked Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo's association with the general, branding them childish in politics. Trotsky believed that the artists' political stances lacked clarity and commitment, considering their involvement politically ambiguous and inconsistent with the revolutionary ideals. In the end, Mujica lost the election, marking a significant shift away from the revolutionary era. Mexico would go on to transition towards a more centralized and institutionalized political system. A year later, Leon Trotsky's home life had settled into a peaceful routine. In the household, he was affectionately called Old Man. Each morning, he would wake up with the sun and tend to the chickens and rabbits at his garden's edge. He would spend his days immersed in his work, granting himself breaks for short naps and shared meals. The house was always busy. Trotsky lovingly referred to everyone in the home as a big family. That big family included 7 secretaries, his wife Natalia, and his grandson Esteban. Despite the Mexican government's insistence that Trotsky steer clear of politics, his political ambitions remained hidden under the surface. To evade any potential suspicion that Trotsky was still organizing, he strategically filled his inner circle with foreign secretaries, many of whom were American. On Sundays, the family would play games in the garden or collected cacti in the countryside. It marked a rather peaceful time for Leon Trotsky. On May 24, 1940, around 20 gunmen, led by Mexican muralist and Stalinist David Alfaro Siqueiros, stormed the compound. Esteban hid behind his bed while bullets flew into the home. Natalia pushed her husband onto the ground and covered him with her body as the guns poured out their ammunition. They would all survive the attack. After the assassination attempt, the house was fortified with metal doors and watchtowers. Outings were prohibited. Despite that, Trotsky would often jest, "Natalia, they have given us one more day of life." Aware of the imminent threat of another attack, he lived in constant fear for the safety of himself and his family. Unfortunately, that fear proved to be correct. On August 20th, 1940, Leon Trotsky was in his study tending to his rabbits. It was at about 5 p.m. when Ramon Mercader had made his way onto the Trotsky compound. Walking through the gates of the estate, Mercader was greeted as an ally. He was a well-known visitor whose lover, Sylvia Agiloff, happened to work for the famous theorist as one of his many secretaries. Mercader had made his presence known by lauding Leon Trotsky with attention and impassioned conversations. To Trotsky, Ramon Mercader was the son of a Belgian diplomat and a staunch supporter of his ideas. For that reason, Ramon Mercader was able to walk through the courtyard and to the house with ease. Eventually, he made it upstairs to Trotsky's study, and what ensued would lead to the death of one of Russia's most powerful Marxist advocates. It all happened fast, as these things usually do. Mercader greeted Trotsky, but unbeknownst to Leon, Ramon was hiding a steely ice pick in his raincoat. It was there that Ramon Mercader attacked Trotsky, hitting him in the skull, able to land 3 inches into Trotsky's brain. Of the attack, Ramon remembered, the man screamed in such a way that I will never forget it as long as I live. Trotsky put up a fight, biting Mercader and screaming for help. Trotsky's wife, Natalia, was unfortunately the first one to get to the room. She ran to him, and it was there that she saw the fatal blows that would ultimately take the life of her husband. Trotsky's guards soon followed, seizing Mercader and beating the man within an inch of his life. Surprisingly, Trotsky saved his assailant, yelling to his guards, "No, he must not be killed. He must talk." Here, Frida Kahlo found herself under intense scrutiny by the authorities, with several factors contributing to their suspicions. As previously mentioned, her political beliefs had undergone a significant shift, transforming her into a staunch Stalinist and placing her in direct opposition to Trotsky. Her unwavering commitment to these ideals was widely known, and she actively mobilized the Mexican Communist Party against its adversaries. Throughout her life, these principles had become an integral part of her identity. What's more, her extramarital affair with Leon Trotsky had become a topic of gossip, further intertwining their lives. The government had also uncovered details about a chance encounter Frida had during a trip to Paris the previous year. In 1939, Frida found herself devastated once more by her husband. Diego Rivera had filed for divorce and rekindled his relationship with her sister. To escape the devastation, she accepted an exciting offer to exhibit her work in Paris. Soon, she found herself in France, surrounded by an adoring audience of fellow artists, including notable figures like André Breton, Jacqueline Lamba, Dora Maar, Pablo Picasso, Marcel Duchamp, and Elsa Schiaparelli. It was within these circles that she crossed paths with Ramon Mercader. The government thoroughly investigated the case and soon uncovered the true nature of the assassination plot. Initially, Ramon Mercader concealed his identity and falsely claimed that Trotsky's refusal to permit his marriage to Sylvia had driven him to commit the murder. Sylvia, who was Trotsky's assistant at the time, was initially arrested as an accomplice. It became evident that Mercader had been meticulously planning the assassination for years. It was revealed that he deliberately sought out Sylvia to carry out his plan of infiltrating Trotsky's inner circle. After a day of questioning, both Frida Kahlo and Sylvia Agaloff were released. Mercader was subsequently convicted of murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. The USSR denied any involvement in the assassination. Frida was devastated upon hearing the news of Trotsky's assassination. In her diary, she expressed the weight of her sorrow as she grappled with the loss. Kahlo recalled how Leon, this towering figure in the world, consistently extended his care and support during her bouts of illness. In her writing, each sentence poignantly conveys the growing palpability of his absence, as if Kahlo is navigating in real time through the profound loss of not only a political ally, but also a compassionate friend who had left an indelible mark on her life. Frida's words not only encapsulate the immediate waves of grief she experienced, but also shed light on the lasting impact of Trotsky's presence in her life, a man she deeply respected and admired. In the face of personal and physical struggles, Kahlo's career underwent a transformation. Her first solo exhibition in New York, followed closely by one in Mexico City, solidified her as a bona fide artist. Despite everything, Frida Kahlo persisted in embedding politics into her art. Her paintings increasingly referenced communism from the 1950s onward. Kahlo identified so strongly with the cause that she emblazoned a hammer and sickle onto one of her corsets, a resounding message about her self-perceived identity and alignment with the ideology. In 1951, she wrote in her diary about the fear that her declining health might restrict her contribution to the communist cause. She wrote, "I must struggle with all my strength to ensure that the little that my health allows me to do also benefits the revolution, the only real reason to live." In her later years, Kahlo's health further declined, and this period was characterized by multiple surgeries that ultimately led to the amputation of her right leg just below the knee in 1953. Nevertheless, in 1954, she created her most politically charged work, Marxism Will Give Health to the Sick. The canvas intricately wove together Kahlo's physical suffering with her unwavering commitment to communism. At its center, she clutched a red Marxist book, while large hands, a symbol of the movement, embraced her corset-bound body. The painting's unequivocal message resonated clearly. If Marxism can heal Kahlo, it held the transformative power to heal the world. Through all the physical challenges, Kahlo continued to immerse herself in her art. She transformed her home, La Casa Azul, into a haven for creativity. Through it all, Kahlo strove to maintain her social connections in her final days. She hosted friends as often as she could with her husband, Diego Rivera. Kahlo's emotional state during this period is well documented through her personal diary, revealing her most personal thoughts in their rawest form. In an entry reflecting on the lessons she learned in life, she wrote, "I never knew I was a painter until I was sick. I never knew I was a woman until I was divorced." Despite the challenges they faced in their relationship, Frida and Diego remained constants in each other's lives. After their divorce, they remarried, reconciling once more. In her final diary entry, she expresses gratitude to a list of doctors and friends, concluding with a powerful declaration. "I hope the leaving is joyful, and I hope never to return." Following these written words, the artist carefully crafted a depiction of the Angel of Death. Frida Kahlo passed away on July 13th, 1954, at the age of 47. Upon Kahlo's death, a banner featuring the hammer and sickle covered her coffin. In the aftermath of her death, La Casa Azul became a museum, preserving not only Kahlo's artwork, but also the physical and emotional traces of her life. Her legacy endures as a testament to the indomitable spirit of Frida Kahlo, solidifying her status as an iconic figure whose art and personal narrative transcend the confines of time and resonate with audiences worldwide. The visceral emotions encapsulated in her paintings, the unapologetic exploration of identity and pain, and the intricate fusion of surrealism and symbolism have left an indelible mark on the global artistic landscape. Kahlo's enduring influence extends beyond the canvas, shaping conversations about resilience, individuality, and the power of self-expression. As her art continues to be celebrated in exhibitions, museums, and scholarly discussions, Frida Kahlo remains an inspirational force, inviting new generations to delve into the profound depths of her creativity and the rich tapestry of her life.